I'm so happy to have our city manager, Katie Rodriguez, with us today. Thanks for coming, Katie.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And Katie will be talking about the 2021 budget and proposed levy. And so before we get into the nitty-gritty of the levy and the budget, can you talk to us a little bit about what the process looks like? When does the budgeting process start, and what does it all entail?
Yeah, great question. And really, the budget never ends. It is a constant process because just as important to put together the next year's budget is to monitor our current budgets, because we want to make sure that we are within those budgeted levels, and we're also constantly looking at the revenues to make sure that they are coming in as predicted. And last year that was tough. 2020, with the pandemic, we had revenues that were declining. We found corresponding cuts, and we also had to do things differently. We had to deliver those services differently. So, but the intensity of putting together the budget is really from May to September. And there's a lot of different levels and a lot of different levels of staff that look at that. And it starts with, the department directors and their staff putting together the very detailed numbers. Then Finance Director Chris Regis reviews it. Then I sit in on meetings with the department directors to go through those very detailed numbers. And then finally, we put it all together with that feedback and present it to the council, and then they're looking at it with a very big picture lens and making sure that we're hitting the vision and the values that they've set out for us.
Thank you. And can you talk a little bit about how the COVID pandemic has impacted our levy and our increases this year?
Yes. As I mentioned before, our revenues were down because of the pandemic, and we had to deliver services differently. We had to deliver almost every service differently. So a lot of our staff had to become experts in different roles, and they did such a good job stepping up to that. And because we had limited finances, we didn't outsource a lot of this. A lot of cities have more resources than Richfield does, but we did it all in-house for the most part. And so I'm really proud of folks for stepping into those roles, and I can give a bunch of examples, but I know that we only have limited time. So that was part of it. Also, looking into next year, we needed to identify how we could quickly scale down the budget if we needed to because of the pandemic, how we could continue to do things differently. We have some confidence in doing that because we did it this year, but we've done that. And that's not in the budget, but the directors have identified things that they could cut back on. Also, because of the financial challenges with the pandemic and the economy, being in a down economy now, we have identified things that we can defer. Largely capital projects that have been deferred. One of the big ones is the 65th Street reconstruction will be now scheduled for 2022.
And I just want to add, our city staff are always working around the clock to keep the city going in a normal year where there's no big crisis. But with COVID, really, I've seen city staff take an amazing amount of leadership and have had to make extremely hard decisions about what expenses would be cut, what needs to be deferred. And not only that, we also had CARES funding from the federal government for COVID. And that was an additional stress and impact on our city staff in an already difficult time, thinking about the budget. How are we going to get reimbursed? What can we get reimbursed for? And I just think our staff has done a tremendous job. We've been able to keep our staff here at the city whole, and we've been able to continue providing those quality services. And staff have even been very innovative in the work that they've done, making sure that they're putting out great multilingual communications to all of our residents. We have things like park ambassadors and providing free programming for kids so that our families can stay physically active and connected during COVID. So I just want to highlight the great work that I've seen our staff do under such tremendous pressure because of COVID. So for 2021, we just landed on a 5.5 increase. Can you talk about what that means?
Yeah, so the city levies in dollars, and so our levy for 2020 was, or I should say our levy for 2021 is 5.5% more than the levy in 2020. And the property tax levy funds 70% of our general fund, so it's a big funding source. and we tried really hard to get it down. As we've talked about, we have some challenges with the pandemic, decreasing revenues, increased costs. We also wanted to advance work in some priority areas, and so we did add a couple positions, one of them being a equity and inclusion position, and we're super excited about that because we really believe that that's going to take us to the next level with this really important work that we're doing. We also are accelerating the body camera for the police department, and we feel that that's an important priority because of transparency, also related to equity. And we are working with Edina. We're sharing a position, an embedded mental health worker. It's a Hennepin County program, and we're very excited about that. Also part of that effort to make equity a priority for the city. And so those put pressures on the budget. We also have a very young and talented staff, and they are, as they work and get better at their jobs, they go through step increases, and we have a cost of living adjustment that was negotiated at a time that was better, we had better economy. And so those put pressure on the budget as well. We also improved Lyndale last year, and so we've got a debt levy of about $200,000 that puts pressure. So even with all of those extra pressures, we had reduced it to below 5%, but then we found out late, because our tax base is growing, our local government aid, which is a state program, was reduced by about $365,000, and so that put additional pressure on that levy, and so we landed at 5.5%. But that is about, what our neighbors are doing, and so it's tough times. We're trying to balance furthering those goals, building a more just Richfield for everyone, and continuing to deliver those quality services with making sure that we're not asking too much from taxpayers.
Could you share a little bit about the cost savings measures that we've taken to also reduce pressure on our levy for 2021?
Yeah. Great question. So I've already talked a bit about deferring some capital projects, the largest one being the 65th Street reconstruction. But we've also left some positions open and are evaluating any position that opens. We reevaluate, can we let that stay open for the time being? Some other things that we've done, we're doing a lot in-house. We've repurposed staff a lot. They've really stepped up, and we've talked about that and been really creative in delivering those services differently. And then we also cut back on professional development for staff. In 2020, we will do that into 2021 if we need to. And also department directors have identified some other cuts if they need to make them in 21, just to respond to the financial fallout because of the pandemic and the pandemic itself. So those are just a few examples.
Great. And lastly, could you talk a little bit about how residents can get engaged in the budget process for 2021, how they can learn more, and how they can get involved?
Yes. Well, they can call me or email me their questions. They can also call or email Finance Director Chris Regis. They can contact their council member, and then they can also participate in our virtual Truth in Taxation, which will be on November 30th.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, for joining us to talk about the 2021 budget and tax levy. And we'll have a lot more information and resources for our residents on the levy so that we make sure we help everybody understand what the budget looks like for 2021. Thank you for your leadership, Katie.
Thank you.